Welcome to City Hall. We will get started with the invocation and our Pledge of Allegiance. Diana Bradley is the lead chaplain at Hobby Lobby. She'll lead us in the invocation. Afterwards, I'll ask Councilman Pete White if he'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand?
Let's pray. Jesus, we thank you so much for the day and for all these men and women you've called into service for our community. Thank you for their hearts, their commitments, and their sacrifice. And I'm sure that with this many people, that there are some people that are really tired today. They may feel discouraged or frustrated. They may feel overwhelmed. They really need to hear from you today. When life gets as crazy, busy as we all are, we may start to feel that we aren't making a difference. Well, God, that's when we need to remember that we have limits, but you don't. You can restore us if we draw near to you. So use these times in our lives to see you. Help us to remember to converse with you throughout the day. Give us wisdom beyond our experiences, beyond our circumstances, and beyond our education, God. Make the path clear today for understanding and give us confidence to stand firm in our convictions. Thank you for loving us where we are, and help us to reach out to others today like you reach out to us. We love you, Jesus, and we commit this day to you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We begin this morning drawing attention to the fact that OG&E, one of our leading corporate citizens, has been named Public Electric Utility of the Year. We have CEO Pete Delaney here. Pete, if you'll come up, and I know Pat Lewis is here, Randy Lewis, Kate Jeffries, everybody will come forward. We have a mayoral citation. I'll ask the clerk to read it as we get settled.
Whereas Electric Light and Power, ELP magazine, honored OG&E with its prestigious Electric Utility of the Year award for 2011. Whereas ELP editors annually evaluate electrical utilities across North America to determine which company stands out as the best. Whereas ELP editors were particularly impressed this year with OG&E in a variety of areas, including customer satisfaction, financial health, renewable energy, and energy efficiency efforts. Whereas ELP Editor-in-Chief Teresa Hansen was impressed with OG&E's smart meter rollout and expects other electric utilities will try to replicate OG&E's success with the program. OG&E has installed nearly 500,000 smart meters to date, and the company continues to install around 1,500 a day. OG&E has been lauded for keeping rates low compared with other states and the good reliability of its service. Surveys show that OG&E customers remain the happiest among mid-sized utilities. Whereas for more than 100 years from its start in the raw Oklahoma Territory in 1902 through the decades to today, OG&E has dedicated itself to strengthening its business and its communities. Whereas OG&E is moving forward with plans to meet its customers' growing needs by investing in infrastructure, deploying smart grid technology, and creating positive customer experiences. Whereas though much has changed since 1902, OG&E's dedication to its customers and communities has remained. Whereas OG&E is focused on its vision to be an industry leader with a passion for helping customers, developing employees, and delivering shareholder value. Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Oklahoma City do hereby commend OG&E on its selection as the 2011 Electric Utility of the Year.
Let's show our appreciation and acknowledgement of this great award. Thanks very much.
Well, on behalf of our over 3,000 members at OG&E, I'd like to thank the Mayor and the Council for this recognition and citation. I do want to mention that we're one of only 2 utilities to have won this twice, and Pat Ryan may remember last time back in 1983. Our members work real hard, as you know, for the city and across the state, and this will mean a lot to them, and I'll make sure all of our members are aware that you've bestowed this honor on them today. Thank you.
Let's show our appreciation one more time. Thanks very much. We also have a proclamation to acknowledge that the Festival of the Arts is just around the corner. Let's have Emily Trotter, Peter DeLisi, Tom Walsh, Sue Hale come on and come forward. Yeah, it's springtime in Oklahoma. I just had to watch the weather last night to see that. We have a proclamation. I'll ask the clerk to read the proclamation.
Whereas the 46th Annual Festival of the Arts, produced by the Arts Council of Oklahoma City, will officially open on Tuesday, April 24th for 6 days of exciting visual and performing arts activities. Whereas the Festival of the Arts is recognized nationally as one of the most spectacular fine arts festivals in America, featuring more than 170 visual artists, continuous live entertainment on 4 outdoor stages, art activities for all ages, and delicious festival foods. Whereas Sue Hale and Tom Walsh, the 2012 festival co-chairs, lead a team of more than 5,000 volunteers who donate their time, talents, resources, and energies to produce a spectacular celebration of the arts for the city of Oklahoma City. Whereas the Festival of Arts is an annual springtime event which is free to the public and made possible through the generous support of civic and business leaders and individuals who embrace the arts. Proceeds from the festival allow the Arts Council of Oklahoma City to continue to expand its events, arts programming, arts education programs, and cultural arts facilities for the citizens of Oklahoma City. Now therefore, Mick Cornett, the mayor of the city of Oklahoma City, does hereby proclaim April 24th through 29th as the 46th Annual Festival of the Arts Week in Oklahoma City, and he asks all citizens to join in honoring the Arts Council of Oklahoma City, the volunteers, and the artists who take part in this event.
Let's show our appreciation. 5,000 volunteers all working. Thank you all very much. We really appreciate it. Would you like to talk about the event?
Sure. Tom, you want to start?
First of all, we'd like to thank you and the council for allowing us to be here, to thank you for all the city does for the Festival of the Arts. The festival is 2 weeks from today, starting at 11 a.m. We will feature 144 artists along Hudson and in our sculpture garden and South Hudson Gallery, featuring artists from 28 states and 2 foreign countries. Of course, during the course of the festival, we'll have over 250 performances on 4 stages scattered around the festival grounds and in the myriad gardens. And, of course, International Food Row, we will have everybody's favorites like Indian Taco and Strawberries Newport, and some new items this year like Australian Joffles.
What was that?
Australian Joffles.
What's that?
Well, if it were Italian instead of Australian, it would be a panini. It's a toasted, pressed sandwich. And we're looking forward to it. It's a new item this year, and we hope everybody will come out and taste it.
I'm guessing they will.
Well, also, besides all those fun things, we have a youth art sale. This is our 2nd year for it, and we're so excited because now we have 26 young artists from elementary school to high school, and they'll be doing a sale on Saturday of festival, which is the 28th. And these youngsters are amazing. And we think that this is one of the things that Arts Council and Arts Festival does so well, is that we feature young people and get them, showcase their work and get them very interested. So again, we're just thrilled to be here today and to also invite everyone to be sure to come to Festival this year. It's going to be beautiful weather, Tom has promised. And we also have a wonderful program for all the performance stages. We're really excited. So I think it's going to be great. We also have a poster to present to you, Mayor, which we will present on opening day when you're there, right?
Wonderful. I'll be there.
Okay.
And 5,000 volunteers helping you also. Thank you all for the coordination that allows so many of our citizens to take part in such a wonderful rite of spring. You bet. Thank you. Let's show our appreciation again. And it is National Telecommunications Week. We have some of our people here today. Let's see, David Shoup, Lisa Saxon, Kelly Garrett, Nate Wallach, Wivetta Barclay. Come on forward. We have a proclamation. I'll ask the clerk to read that.
Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services. Whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers and firefighters are dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Oklahoma City Emergency Communications Center. Public safety dispatchers and call takers are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. Whereas public safety dispatchers are the single vital link for our police officers by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information and ensuring their safety. Whereas public safety dispatchers and call takers of the Oklahoma City Police Department have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. Whereas each public safety dispatcher and call taker has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their job in the last year. Whereas recent examples of the commitment of public safety dispatchers and call takers to the safety of our community was their response to the tornado of May 24, 2011, the wildland fires occurring in August 2011, and the earthquakes occurring in November 2011. Now therefore, Mick Cornett, the mayor of the city of Oklahoma City, does hereby proclaim April 8th through 14th as National Telecommunications Week in Oklahoma City.
Let's show our appreciation to our responders.
I'd like to thank the mayor and council for this honor and privilege for us to be here this morning. I've heard the council say many, many times the most important resource our city has is our people, and that's so evident this morning. So thank you so very much.
Agreed. Let's show our appreciation one more time. Thank you all for all you do. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Calling the meeting to order, we're on item 3 of the council agenda. This is to notify that we have a new vice mayor, Larry McAtee, taking over for a period that begins today. Congratulations, I think. All right. I'll need a motion on that. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 4 is the Journal of Council Proceedings. Item 4A is to receive the Journal of Council Proceedings for April 3rd, and item 4B is to approve the Journal of Council Proceedings for March 27, 2012. All right. Comments or questions on the journal? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 5 is request for uncontested continuances.
Mr. Mayor, listed in your agenda are the deferral or striking of items 8A, 8B, and 8D. And then on top of that, on page 13, under items 8G1, item H, 3025 Southwest 40th. We ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. Item I, 1141 Northwest 41st Street. We ask that that be stricken. The owner has secured. And item K, 701 Southeast 50th Street. We ask that that be stricken. Again, the owner has secured.
Any other requests for uncontested continuances?
Mayor?
Yes, Kip.
On 8Q,
8Q?
yes.
All right.
There's been some last-minute information that we would like to have an opportunity to review on QC.
All right. Q1C.
If we could continue that for 2 weeks. I've talked to staff, and we like to look at some more information.
All right. Do we need to?
April 24th. No, you can order it.
All right.
There's no-
We'll have that one brought back to us April 24th. Y'all work on it in the meantime. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Any other requests for uncontested continuances? All right, we'll recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. There are 4 items. Comments or questions on the MFA?
Your Honor, I have a question. MFAA is the addition of some engineering work on a paving project, and it calls for some work that is required by EPA, a categorical exclusion and specialist studies. I wondered what those were.
I don't know the answer to that. Hopefully Mr. Winger can come in a minute and answer that.
And whatever, I'm just curious as to what they were. It's not an important issue.
Here he is.
Sorry, Mr. Councilman, I missed the question.
The question, Eric, referred to some engineering amendments on MFAA Point A. This is a project on 178th Street from Pennsylvania to May. And there's some work that was apparently required by EPA for the engineer to prepare a categorical exclusion and specialist studies. And I wonder what those items were.
So when the project was originally contemplated, staff did not believe that these specific studies that are required by federal funded projects would be required. Since the project is nearing that completion stage in the design review, we've been informed that it is required, and so this amendment pays the engineer for that extra work.
Okay, what does the extra work consist of? It says a categorical exclusion. What is a categorical exclusion?
It's basically a NEPA environmental study. So it's environmental studies. It will look at all the environmental requirements to ensure that there's no negative impact.
And that's also the specialist studies and the categorical exclusion, both of those. I know they relate to NEPA, but I wondered what specifically a categorical exclusion was.
Let me look that up and I'll get that back to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the MFA? All right. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCMFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. 2 items. Okay. Comments or questions on the PPA?
Your Honor, I have a question on PPA Point B, and this doesn't exactly relate to the project as appointed here, but it triggered something in my mind. At the Dell site, we had a problem with methane gas. Has that problem been resolved?
Brent, do you know the status of that? I haven't heard about that. I'm very familiar with it, but I haven't heard anything about it for a year.
I actually will need to refer to one of my engineers in Public Works to find out more detail on that. I know we've been working with DEQ on that, but I do not have an update.
Well, there are 2 questions. One was it's the issue taken care of, and second was we had some environmental insurance, and there was some discussion of whether that would apply, and we could recover our costs there. So anyway.
It was a situation where that was a landfill site, and when we built that, some methane gas was captured under the slab, and so that was being vented. It was low levels, but it was enough that it was coming up through some of the into the buildings, and so there was some ventilation put around to ventilate that off, and we'll find out the status of that for you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Ready to vote on the PPA? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCPPA and reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket. We have a motion and a second. Any individual considerations on the consent docket? Larry?
F, Your Honor, as in Frank.
All right. Meg?
And, Your Honor, T and U.
All right. Larry, item F.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. This particular item is, I think, very, very important to the future economic growth of part of Oklahoma City. The Meridian Corridor houses a number of hotels. 3 new hotels have gone up just recently. It's also the termination for the river cruiser. The trails along the Oklahoma River are going to be expanded from Southwest 15th and Meridian to Lake Overholser. And a number of years ago, a project was done repaving and doing a streetscape on the Meridian Avenue corridor from Reno down to Southwest 15th. It was funded partially with federal funds. It's now planned within the next several years to complete that project from Southwest 15th to Southwest 29th. As the city manager will recall, the streetscape that was put in there is being maintained right now by the Oklahoma City Parks and Recreation Department, and the goal is to have that streetscape taken over by the businesses along that corridor and form a business improvement district. We have not had a whole lot of success in forming that. We've made some progress. This particular request here is for a proposal that Kim Cooperhart in Planning has come up with. She feels that a consultant can come in and help organize and put that BID together so that we might have a streetscape along there and a very vital corridor that will promote tourism and especially support the equine events at the fairgrounds where a lot of the people who come into the fairgrounds stay. So this is a very important project and one that I hope the council will approve.
All right, thanks, Larry. Meg, item T and U.
If I could, Mayor, I just wanted to mention this is sort of Arts Day on the City Council. Item T is a resolution that accepts a donation of capital improvement projects for the Civic Center Music Hall from our Civic Center Foundation. And the total dollar amount of facility improvements that have been completed in the last year is $288,000 plus. And so I wanted to compliment the Civic Center Foundation for making that contribution back to the city. And secondly, and there are actually 3 companion items to you, but a number of years ago, Leadership Oklahoma City commissioned a sculpture for about $400,000 that was originally, I think, thought to be placed in Bicentennial Park. It's been relocated down to the river, and it will be located in the Boathouse Foundation in a turnaround location there in the new parking lot. And so it's a wonderful piece of artwork and a great collaborative project, and I just wanted to thank the Inasmuch Foundation, who I think was the lead donor, but many donors and many class members of Leadership Oklahoma City, and it will be a terrific enhancement to the Boathouse Foundation.
Oh. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions on the consent docket?
Mayor?
Yes, Skip.
If I may, on H, this would be addressed to Parks and Recreation in reference to the list of projects that's listed. And I noticed there's one project that has been a continued issue in reference to citizens' concerns, which is the Foster Center at 614 Northeast 4th Street. And I would just like to find out what the project is, because the report does not specifically state exactly what the issues that will be part of this this construction project.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. As you can see, there are a number of locations, 11, and Foster Center on Northeast 4th is one of those. The improvements at Foster Center are all ADA related, as are most of these. The ADA work for Foster Center is all out front. The entrance, the porch, the walkways do not currently meet all requirements, and modifications will be made in this contract to make it fully ADA accessible. All outdoor.
So each one of these projects are all ADA compliance issues?
No, sir. There's one that has ADA and other matters,
okay.
And that is Zach Taylor Park, the last on the list there. Zach Taylor Park has a new playground, walks, picnic tables, benches, seating areas, and some ADA work as well.
Okay. Thank you, Wendell.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the consent docket? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. On to the concurrence docket. All right. Are there any individual considerations? Looking over at myself, a number of Maps for Kids projects looks like moving forward.
Maps for Kids has had a lot of progress lately. It seems to be there's a new ribbon cutting each week on it, and we're down to just a couple of more schools yet to be bid on the Maps for Kids program.
Ready to vote on the concurrence? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We're on to item 8 of the council agenda. These are items that require a separate vote. Item 8A has been struck. Item 8B has already been deferred until May 15th, which puts us up to item C. This would support the efforts of the City Rescue Mission, which is located in Ward 6. Meg, you okay with this?
Yes, I'm great with it. I see Tom Jones is here this morning. Thank you, Tom, for being here. This was approved unanimously at the Planning Commission, and there have been no protests about it, so I'd make a motion to approve, please.
Second. All right. We're voting on item 8C. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8D has been deferred until April 17th. Item 8E is the final hearing on the booting ordinance that came from our police department. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on item 8E today? All right. Cast your votes on item 8E. Passed unanimously. Item 8F is We sure do. Motion second on the emergency. Cast your votes, and the emergency passes unanimously.
And Mayor, I think if I could go back one, I think that on item C, they had requested the emergency as well. Apologize, I moved the emergency.
Okay. We're now voting on the emergency for item 8C. We have a motion and a second on the emergency. Cast your votes, and it passed unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Item 8F is a public hearing regarding dilapidated structures. Is there anyone here wishing to speak under the item listed under 8F? All right. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8G is a public hearing regarding unsecured structures. Is there anyone here wishing to speak under any item listed under 8G? All right. How about a motion? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8H is a couple of revocable right-of-way permits. Item 8H1 is from the American Heart Association. They want to hold the 2012 Central Oklahoma Heart Walk on April 21st, downtown and in Bricktown. Is anyone here representing the American Heart Association? All right, how about a motion? Okay, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. And item 8H2 is the Elemental Coffee Roasters, LLC, hoping to host the H and 8th Night Market on May 18th. This is on North Hudson Avenue, near Northwest 7th and Northwest 8th Street. It's in Ward 6.
Great. Laura, I see Laura Mousenet here, our newest school board member, I think. Good morning.
Good morning and congratulations.
So I think we already have a permit for most of these, but this one's a small change, and I thought you might share with us.
This is a small date change. So we have closed over the winter, relaunched for the spring. Our first event was at the end of last month. We're coming again April 27th, and then this one on the 18th. We're coordinating with the Better Block event, which I think you'll be seeing on council agenda really soon. It will be a great event, so we want to cross-promote and increase the attendance to both of our events.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I move approval.
Okay, we're voting on item 8H2. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8I is a money transfer related to TIF 4 and 5.
Mayor, items I and J are related, and they have to do with TIFs 4 and 5. And those were created before the Economic Development Trust. And the Economic Development Trust has kind of been given the authority to oversee all of our TIFs as we go forward. So we think it's prudent to move the administration of the TIFs 4 and 5 into the Economic Development Trust. And these two items help us, will facilitate that.
Okay. We'll vote on them individually. Comments or questions on item 8I? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. And then item 8J. Comments? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8K, I understand we do not need executive session?
No, K and L are salary continuations, I think.
All right, we do not need executive session, is that right? Did I skip something? Yeah, we're on K.
Okay.
Move the item.
Motion? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. And then item 8L, I understand we do not need executive session?
Do not.
Move the item.
Okay. Cast your votes. It passed unanimously. Item 8M, I understand we do not need executive session?
Do not.
Okay, how about a motion? Cast your votes. Item 8M passes unanimously. Item 8N, I understand we do need executive session.
Yes.
All right, how about a motion to move that one into executive session?
Motion to move.
Okay. Cast your votes. That item moves to executive session. Item 8O, I understand we do not need executive session?
Do not.
Okay, motion? Cast your votes on 8O. It passes unanimously. Item 8P, I understand we do not need executive session?
That's correct.
Okay. Cast your votes. Moving forward, item 8Q, claims recommended for denial. Item 8Q1C has already been deferred until April 17th. The 24th, okay, April 24th. Anyone here wishing to speak on any item listed under 8Q1? All right, how about a motion? Cast your votes. It passes unanimously. On to items from council, and I know Councilwoman Salyer is heads up, and I neglected earlier to thank you for your service as Vice Mayor for the past 6 months.
Thank you. You're very welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you for the opportunity. Larry, you're going to have a wonderful time. Item 9A is an ordinance set for introduction today, or actually reintroduction. We talked about this once before when it was brought forth. I think my colleagues are aware that we have a number of high-rise housing projects coming out of the ground in and surrounding downtown in design review districts. And this was actually brought forth by some of the neighbors in the historic neighborhoods who have looked at other cities and towns around the country where this kind of development's going on and have in place some limited restrictions for what can be placed on balconies. There's some concern, and balconies have been described as apartment dwellers' backyards, and so there was some concern about what might happen there. And so we looked at other communities. The Municipal Councilor's Office did some research on other cities that have a lot of high-rise living and have crafted something very simple that basically says on your balcony you can't place items that belong indoors, indoor furniture, sofas. I said this is somewhat affectionately known as the Barcalounger ordinance because that was the real concern, was that people might put inappropriate furniture out on their balconies and have it viewed from the street level. So fairly simple. This will only apply in the downtown design review districts. It will not apply citywide. And so today we're just setting this for introduction. We'll have a public hearing on May the 1st for adoption on May 15th.
All right. Comments or questions on item 9A?
Just to comment, Your Honor, I will oppose this resolution when we have an opportunity to vote on it. I mean, I think this is clearly the responsibility of the managers or owners of the apartments to enforce. It's not a city issue. There's no ordinance that relates to what I put in my backyard. And if the balconies indeed are the backyards of these apartments, I'm not sure that we have a role in enforcing what goes on those balconies.
Yeah, I think it's in response to some of the concerns of the neighbors.
That's all well and good, I think, but the response should be directed, the complaint should be directed to the people who own or manage those apartment complexes, not to the city. I think we're using the city to enforce something that they should do. That's just an opinion.
Okay. Any other comments or questions today as this item is being introduced? All right, we have a motion. Second. All right, cast your votes on item 9A. Passed unanimously. Pat, items from council?
You know, just a quick item. On the, a couple of years ago, there was a lot of work done on the Classen median in the Asian district. There was a landscape architect who designed some really attractive features. And it's come to my attention that we're not maintaining that very well. Grass is growing up, and I wondered if who had responsibility for that maintenance. And if it was the city, why hasn't the city done a better job of taking care of it? Because it is a very attractive feature, and it's being allowed to deteriorate, I think. It will lose the value that we spent on that project earlier.
If I could tag a quick comment into Pat, we placed a number of architectural elements that look like little small pagodas and things, and they were all painted bright red at the bases, and that bright red is completely faded to kind of a weird pink. I noticed it over the weekend as well. So mowing and painting maybe are some things that need to be taken care of.
All right. Skip? Okay.
I'm sorry. I'd like to address that if I may. We've recently contracted with OKC Beautiful to begin the maintenance of the area that you mentioned on Classen, and we think we'll see great improvement.
When might we see those improvements, Wendell?
The contract's in force now, so we assume that they will begin immediately.
Okay, is there anything the city can do or should have done to implement this thing and move it along faster?
Prior to the contract with OKC Beautiful, the maintenance of the median along that boulevard was with the contractor who had installed it. No, sir, I believe there's an irrigation system.
A working irrigation system?
As far as I know it is. I'll need to check to make sure it's working, but it was my
It
understanding.
looks like, just from the appearance, that it's not, if it's working, it's not working very well.
I'd be glad to check that. Yes, sir.
Okay. Skip?
Yes. I was asked by one of the members of the National Sorority of Phi Delta Kappa. Had their 46 Southwest Regional Conference in Oklahoma City on March the 30th. It was from March the 30th to April the 1st. And they were very, very pleased with the hospitality of the city of Oklahoma City, and would like to thank, I also thank the mayor for one of their ads, and also to the Bricktown Association. They felt like that the Bricktown hospitality in the Bricktown area was just absolutely fantastic, and so that was the city was the host for their 46th regional conference. And tonight, as a result of last year's experience, the Oklahoma City Fire Department and the Oklahoma City Council has teamed up to try to educate our citizens, and especially those individuals who live in the outrange rural areas as it relates to wildfires. There is predictions that because of the weather patterns that we could very well experience some of the same similar type of issues that we experienced last year, in which the city was engaged in over 1,000 wild and grass fires in Oklahoma County. And so tonight, the fire department, and hosted by myself and the Oakdale School, will have an educational forum at the Oakdale School this evening at 6:30, and that's at 11901 North Sooner Road. And on April the 17th, Councilman McAtee will host a forum at the Southwest, at Bridgestone Intermediate Center, which is located at 1700 South Council. And on April the 19th, Councilman Pete White will host an educational forum at Harmony Christian Church. And the fire department is reaching out to educate as many people that they can as it relates to some of the issues that property owners can engage in, and try to prevent some of the fires if, in fact, we do experience the same thing that we experienced last year. Thank you.
Okay. Meg, anything else?
Your Honor, I just make a follow-up comment on the skips. First of all, these are not ward sensitive. Anybody can go to any meeting. And the second point is, we're going to have one in the northwest quadrant probably around the 1st of May. We wanted to be last, and I think we've got a good location picked out. It's not confirmed yet, so I won't mention it now, but sometime around the 1st of May, we'll have what I think may be the last of these meetings, and I invite Councilman Mars to encourage his people to attend it as well, because in reality, there's not a lot left in Ward 8 that really fits the rural criteria, but we do have areas that have not been fully developed that may benefit from this kind of presentation. So we wanted to make it available to them, and then encourage anybody else's constituents who missed these first group of meetings, and they want to find out about what they might do to protect their homes, they can attend here.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
If I could, Wednesday was our Ward 6 Day for the Youth Council, and I wanted to thank Debbie Martin and Mary Walsh, who organized that fabulous program. But we did something a little different this Wednesday, and we got rid of our bus, and we spent the entire day walking around downtown Oklahoma City. I think the kids had a fantastic time. We walked down to the IAO gallery in Film Row and talked about the real estate development down there. We walked back to the Devon Tower, and were graciously hosted by Clay Kempker and all. We had lunch with the new restaurant. We walked over to the museum. We walked to the Museum of Art. We walked back to City Hall. We wandered through the Myriad Gardens, and I think it was a really great experience to see kind of the renaissance of the core of downtown. It was a fun day, and those are just wonderful young people getting engaged in what's going on in our city. So thank you.
You wore out the youth
I
council.
wore them out. They were so tired. I asked for feedback. They said they were so tired they couldn't give any. Just wait till they get to the real working world.
David?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thursday afternoon, the Urban Land Institute is going to host a meeting to provide the initial feedback from a survey that they've been conducting the past several weeks concerning Envision 240. That's a study of I-240 between I-44 and I-35. And we are going to hear the initial feedback again based upon their interviews. And I believe Councilman White's participated in those interviews. I had a chance to participate, as well as all the property owners, retail facilities along I-240, as well as going back into the neighborhoods that surround I-240. So I do encourage anybody that has an interest in that part of Oklahoma City to attend. It's 2 p.m. Thursday at Willow Creek Golf and Country Club, and everybody is invited and encouraged to attend. Thank you.
All right. Pete? All right. Larry?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to reiterate what Councilman Kelly was talking about. For those folks out in the southwestern portion of Oklahoma City, next Tuesday night, the 17th at 7 o'clock, that wildfire symposium put on by our fire department will be held at the new Bridgestone Center. I'd like to thank Joe Kitchens and the staff of Western Heights for making that available. It'll be an excellent opportunity for the citizens out there, if they haven't seen that facility, to also see that facility that was dedicated just a couple of months ago. I'd like to thank the neighbors and the John Glenn Association for their hospitality to my wife and I. Last Thursday evening, we had a great meeting over there. And then yesterday, we had the privilege of observing the dedication of the Buchanan Elementary School Maps for Kids project. And the kids were real excited. The work was excellent, and everybody was just thrilled that this ushered in a new era for the elementary school in the Musgrave, Pennington, and Corbin Park area. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. And draw your attention back to the agenda. Councilman Shadid has an item for item 9B.
I might just make my comments first and then go to the resolution.
Sure.
I was very happy to see the name of the ballpark changed to Chickasaw Bricktown Ballpark, away from Newcastle Casino Ballpark. I think it raises questions about giving away your naming rights without having the council have veto power. I found the comments of the public relations director of the Newcastle Casino the most disturbing to me, and I just want to make a comment, because this gambling addiction is an increasing problem for Oklahoma City and Oklahoma. I found the whole attempt at advertising casino in such a very public manner, targeted to families and children, particularly aggressive and disturbing. We have about somewhere between 30 and 100,000 gambling addicts in Oklahoma. We have one slot machine for every 79 people in Oklahoma. About 2 to 5% of the population suffers from gambling addiction. Of course, profits, those 2 to 5% represent much more in terms of profit. I mean, those 2 to 5% of the population are more important in terms of how much they're spending. And like cigarette smokers that die, they need to be replaced. The Oklahoman had a great story about gambling addiction. The average gambling addict is somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 in debt, and they either end up in jail or 13% will attempt suicide. So they need to be replaced. We know that men, for some reason, tend to develop compulsive gambling as teenagers. Women later, and I don't really understand why that is. But so the idea of so aggressively targeting children and families by naming a ballpark after a casino is troubling in that respect. I'm troubled when I talked with Terry White, the director of the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse. We as a state only spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on gambling addiction, and the amount that the tribes spend on gambling, they just basically, my understanding is, refuse to spend money on gambling addiction. I'd like to see, we have some 33 tribes operating 113 casinos in Oklahoma. It's about $3.2 billion in revenue. I'd like to see some of the same aggressiveness in spending money on the treatment and education of gambling addiction that we are to marketing casinos in sporting venues, and that would include the Chesapeake Arena as well. That's it on that. Should I go to my resolution?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I'm introducing this resolution. The meeting of the IMSA board on April 25th will be a pivotal meeting. It's in Stroud. Usually the Tulsa and Oklahoma City divisions meet by video conference. We'll all meet together in Stroud. I understand the mayor of Tulsa will be attending that meeting. We'll be in an executive session discussing the performance of the CEO as well as a class action lawsuit introduced against IMSA. There is this resolution here with Oklahoma City Council. On Thursday, the Tulsa City Council has almost an identical resolution, which they will consider. Theirs is a little more restrictive. It just asks for a state audit. This one is not quite as restrictive. I think the important thing, and maybe David could speak to this, but an investigative audit is not just looking for something inappropriate, but it makes policy recommendations. I think that's the most important part of an audit. IMSA has an audit already, but it just kind of matches revenue expenditures and doesn't make what the benefit of an investigative audit is the policy recommendations that come at the end to the trustees, and then trustees can use that information to make policy, and I think it restores public trust. A word about the Open Meetings Act, which I talked with Kenny. We have an attorney general opinion, but we don't have any case law. My understanding is that you can speak with less than a quorum of other trustees, just as we can in the council, about putting things on the agenda or lobbying things for the agenda. So in addition to myself, I could speak with 4 others. I spoke with Clay Bird, Joe Hodges, and Gary Mars about placing an investigative audit on the agenda. Everyone was in favor of that, but they wanted that run by the chairman, which is Dr. Jim Griffin in Tulsa. I spoke with him. He had no problem putting it on the agenda, but he wanted it to come as a request from the Oklahoma City Council. And then subsequently, the Tulsa City Council is going to do the same thing. And so that's how we got to this point, is that the chairman of the IMSA trustees has requested that Oklahoma City request. Oklahoma City, in our contract with IMSA, does not have the ability to demand an audit. We can only request that the IMSA trustees request an audit, and it's non-binding. In terms of policy recommendations that would be beneficial from such an audit, the first example would be interdivisional transfers. We had the episode about a year ago where Jim Couch asked that we not have interdivisional transfers of funds, and then less than a year later we had almost $1 million transferred, and Jim had to say, no means no again. Jim Williamson then entered and did an audit of the last 10 years, and he could ascertain when and how such large transfers were done. And that's an example of, and that didn't cost us anything, by the way, but that's an example of how you could use that data from an audit, and then you could make policy recommendations. You're doing these interdivisional transfers, and you've done them from as far back as we've audited. How could you meet such shortfalls and respect Oklahoma City's request that you not do it? It cost Oklahoma City taxpayers tens of thousands of dollars in interest payments. So the audit could make a policy recommendation to the trustees of how to meet those demands, but respect Oklahoma City's requests. We've had questions of nepotism. Stories have come out about daughters of the CEO working for the law firm Works and Lentz. The contract with Works and Lentz is non-competitive. It was last considered by the Board of Trustees more than 20 years ago. The financial contract decisions, such as whether the firm would get 35% or 40%, is solely made by the CEO, who has daughters working at this firm. An investigative audit might make recommendations on how to disclose family members that work at vendors, how you might tweak your competitive bidding process, how you might frame your nepotism policy. We've had, obviously, a lot of questions about total care. This resolution asks that the total care piece of the puzzle be audited later just because there's a class action lawsuit. The Tulsa resolution is asking now, it doesn't make that exception. And an audit would analyze the scope of the problem. I think it's not as technically difficult as it's being made out to be. I think with just a basic Microsoft Access program, you can line up those who have paid with the addresses, and I think you can figure out in a very short period of time the scope of the problem. The problem might not be IMSA's billing and collection process, but with the nature of the program. There's nothing else in healthcare like it, where you get billed based on your address. So you've got college students coming home from the summer, you've got apartments with people coming in and out. Who's covered and who isn't covered? There's no other anything like it in healthcare. So that might be the problem, rather than just the billing and collecting personnel. We've talked about travel policy. That's another issue that I think needs to be audited. Revelations about spending have already resulted in the trustees adopting new travel policy. And so that's an example of how policy recommendations could come out. We have a story in the Tulsa World this morning about Paramedics Plus paying $25,000 in travel expenses for the CEO after he became president of the American Ambulance Association. That raises questions. When you read the IMSA's Code of Conduct, the acceptance of gifts and favors, it is IMSA's desire at all times to preserve and protect its reputation to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Consequently, employees may not accept or solicit any gift or favor where the receipt would either compromise impartial performance or would be viewed by the public to compromise impartial performance. An employee shall document any gifts received and immediately notify their supervisor of same. Violation shall be grounds for disciplinary action up to and including termination. The threshold then is not necessarily even what we consider, but would the public view giving $25,000 in travel expenses to the CEO as compromising impartial performance? In a year, we're going to have a competitive bid process to determine who the contractor will be. Paramedics Plus will compete against other companies. One difference, in this instance, sometimes the American Ambulance Association could pay for their president to travel, and people could donate to the American Ambulance Association. The difference here is that Paramedics Plus didn't donate money to the American Ambulance Association, and then the American Ambulance Association paid travel fees of its president. They gave money directly to IMSA. Those funds were commingled, and then we had $500 hotel fees, $1,700 first-class tickets, and on and on. And so it's troubling. I mean, and I think just my gut tells me that the public would view that as compromising impartial performance. And so an audit might give us recommendations as to how, as to the IMSA's Code of Conduct. Does that need to be changed? Does policy need to be changed? We certainly need to know any such donations from any vendors and those with whom we have a contract. We haven't really started looking at the big ticket items, the millions and millions of dollars of ambulances that are being purchased, et cetera. Would competitors who are competing for this paramedics contract, would they also be expected to give $25,000 in travel expenses? It raises some questions. There have been questions about cost. Who would pay for such audits? The mayor of Tulsa asked for a marketing program to be implemented to educate people about the Total Care program. And in our last IMSA trustee board meeting, we were presented with a response, which was IMSA was going to spend $600,000 on a marketing campaign, although they already have $100,000 in PR budget already. I would contend, well, first, that I was struck by that because the $600,000 seemed a large number, and there wasn't an itemization of how that was going to be spent. But you might be better spending some of that $600,000 on audits to understand the scope of the problem, to make policy recommendations before spending so much on a marketing campaign. Jim Williamson, our city auditor, called the state auditor's office and asked how much it would cost. They were told about $5,000 a week. I know that depends on how many people they assign as to how good a deal it is, but talking to David, that seemed like a very reasonable price. $5,000 a week doesn't seem excessive for IMSA and its budget. The city auditor, just as they helped on the interdivisional transfers, might be able to do some work and save some money. And again, even if it costs some money, investigating like we did with the interdivisional transfers would potentially save us, would have in this case saved us tens of thousands of dollars in interest. So I'd ask for approval, and then we'll take it.
Your Honor, I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask.
Yes, go ahead, Pat.
First of all, Councilman Shadid, have the trustees considered this audit in open meeting and voted it down? Is that why you're bringing it to the Oklahoma City Council? I think the concept's great. I'm concerned about two things, one of which is the process. are we getting to the process properly? And that is, should the trustees of EMSA have done some things in this area prior to the time that we have this cause for an audit? And the second concern I have is I think both items need to be investigated, but I think the priority of the billing practices exceeds the priority of the travel expense things, just in sheer magnitude. The issues that have been brought to the forefront in Tulsa didn't deal primarily with travel expenses, though they may be excessive. I don't know that. But I think the high-value target in your concept here is the billing issue. And what I think you're suggesting is good, but it sort of mixes financial internal audits and management audits. And perhaps what the trustees of the EMSA should do is hire a consultant to do a management audit, to look at some of the processes that you suggested are flawed, rather than try to rely on a financial audit to get to that same conclusion. I mean, I think we've got sort of a mixture here, based on your comments, Ed, of financial issues and management issues. And I think your idea of an audit providing some policy guidance is great, but I'm not sure that the kind of audit you're suggesting will get to that level of detail. So I think maybe we need to look at a McKinsey & Company or Adventure, or Accenture, I guess it is, Adventure probably as well, a management audit of the processes that EMSA uses in the management of their responsibilities, rather than an internal financially driven audit. And I think our city auditors and state auditors, as you suggested, have done a lot of financial and internal auditing work, but I don't think they've reached the dimension that a McKinsey or somebody similar to that would bring to the table in terms of the overall management. The concept is great. I think the execution may be slightly flawed.
You want to comment on that?
Well, I mean, first you have to get it on the agenda. And so the chairman is saying, I'll put that on the agenda, but I want a request to come from the city council. And that's how we got here today. I think that all of these involve both financial and management issues. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, every example I gave has both financial and management.
I'm not sure that the auditors you suggested have the breadth of experience in management audits that we need to bring to the table, if indeed we have the kind of problems you suggested. And I don't think we ought to provide cover for the trustees. If the situation is as you described, then the trustees of EMSA haven't done a good job. And if that's the case, we need to get them to step to the table to recognize that and take some action to correct it. And I think the resolution we have here, if EMSA if the trustees decide not to do it, then I think this resolution might be appropriate. But before the trustees make a conscious public decision not to have an audit, then I think this is premature.
I think there could be some truth to what you're saying about being too restrictive of who does the audit. I mean, just limiting it to governmental agencies, there could be utility in having a private company assist in part or all of it. And so I would agree with you there. I'm just going to respectfully disagree with the timing just based on my conversations with other trustees. But ultimately, it will be up to the trustees to decide who does the audit. So this is not binding in any way. This is just a request. And the trustees would have to decide the scope of the audit and who does the audit. And they would not be limited in any way by this resolution from Oklahoma City Council. Or
if that's the case, why don't the trustees act? I mean, if they're going to do what we tell them to do, why don't they go ahead and do it? And I'm not sure about how to get it on the agenda, but I think there ought to be a way for the trustees to put something on the agenda without the approval of the chairman. If that is the case, then I think you need to redo your bylaws to allow trustees to bring items to the table, similar to what we do here.
And we can look at that.
I mean, I think the concept is great. It needs to be done. It'll eliminate a lot of suspicion and concern that the public has about the quality of the work EMSA is doing. Either eliminate it or confirm it. I'm not sure what the answer will be. But I just think the process is important. And I think one of the responsibilities of the council is to ensure that processes put in place are adhered to, because that goes to the protection of our citizens from government doing the wrong kind of thing. That's my only concern.
Okay. Pete?
Well, I think I agree with Pat that if what we do today is not binding on the IMSA trustees, then I think they can take from the conversation around this horseshoe about whether they ought to do an audit or not. They need to do something, but I don't know that using the term immediate investigative audit doesn't do much more than throw gasoline on a fire that I'm not sure is a real fire yet. If the trustees think it's a fire, well, then they need to do something. But my observation of IMSA over a long period of time is they've done a really good job. And there's this, it seems to be this campaign to kind of discredit them at every way you can go at it. You go at it through paramedics, you go at it through Williamson, you go at it through whatever method you can. And I think we need to clear the air on that. But the idea that we call it an immediate investigative audit sounds like we've already taken a position. And I don't know that I'm certainly not going to take a position over what I hear people complain to the newspaper about. We've all been in a situation where if we believed what people complained to the paper about, we'd have been on the wrong side. And I would like to see them do something to straighten this out. But for us to put a dog in the fight with regard to who's right and who's wrong by using language like immediate investigative audit, to me, I can't be supportive of that.
Skip, how many trustees is on the board?
11.
11? And how many from Oklahoma City?
3, 4, 5. Jeffrey Goodlow is the medical director. I don't know if you...
Well, I guess what I'm confused is, my confusion is, who was the person that you stated that in order for this to get on their agenda, that it had to come from the city, but if Tulsa is have they already introduced or passed a resolution?
Thursday, they'll consider the same resolution.
So do they need both Tulsa and Oklahoma City, or do they just need...
They don't need either one of them.
They don't need either one.
They don't need either one of them?
Well, Dr. Jim Griffin is the chairman, and that's what he requested.
Okay.
The chairman of the trust asked that it come, he can't demand, he can't hold it that it has to come from here before he'll put it on. Any trustee can put an item on the agenda, just like we put items on the agenda here. And I can assure you there'll be an item on the agenda for the IMSA trust discussing whether we ought to do an audit or not. To answer Pat's question, no, the trust has never voted on whether to do an audit or not. And that's coming up. I'm sure it'll come up in this meeting in Stroud. I share some of the same concerns that Pete has. I don't have a problem having an audit done. I have a problem with this council passing a resolution to tell the trust that they ought to do one. I look at it the opposite way. Would we appreciate the IMSA trust passing a resolution telling us to do something? That we don't need to get into that part of it. If there is enough information in front of the trust that they think they need to do an audit, then the trust will vote to do an audit. I have a concern, and I said that to the interviewer with the paper, of what it's going to cost and who's going to pay for it. The item that Councilman Shadid discussed about they're doing a PR program in Tulsa and how much it costs, that's totally coming out of the Eastern Division's budget. I want to make sure the people here in the Western Division understand that we're not paying for that. That's coming out of their budget up there. But an audit of the entire IMSA system will have to come out of both divisions' budgets. And we haven't budgeted that. So any additional cost in this budget year, we're going to have to relook at the budget, and it's going to come from somewhere. Somebody's going to have to pay for it. The trust is going to have to pay for it, which in turn means that it's going to come out of the monies that are being paid for into the system. So I'm not supportive of this resolution. I don't like the detail of it. I'm not convinced that an audit of the billing system is warranted. We had doctors and hospital administrators in Tulsa and Oklahoma City both say at the trust meeting last time that these numbers of people that got sued or numbers of people that had billing issues is not high in the medical field. And hospitals file lawsuits against people, and doctors file them. And everybody has a responsibility to take care of your bills, and when you don't, somebody is going to come looking for you at some point in time. And they didn't feel like that the numbers warranted this. Plus, we're right in the middle of a lawsuit. If there's been some problems, then I'm sure the courts are going to work that out at some point in time. But I think that I feel very confident that the IMSA Trust is going to bring up the issue of an audit. I think the trust should define what we want to audit. This council shouldn't be dictating that. If there's improprieties that the paper has brought out, or that a certain trust member has brought out, or anybody else, that people have said, well, you know, there may be something to that, then that ought to be the subject of the audit, or ought to be one of the subjects of the audit. That's not to say we can't have the yearly auditor have an added work program to do whatever it is that we want done, whether it be an investigative audit or a performance audit or management audit, whatever you want to call it. So I'm okay with looking at auditing what the trust thinks needs to be audited. I'm not okay with this council passing a resolution to this extent.
How about Larry and then Pete?
Yeah, I was waiting to hear what Trustee Mars had to say about this. Having been on the trust previously, I seem to recollect, and I may be wrong, Gary, but I thought that when the annual audit came out, there was what's called a management letter, if that's the correct terminology, which the auditor, if he or she feels that some process or some procedure needs to be addressed, I seem to remember some of those being included in a, quote, management letter, unquote. So some of this information, I think, is still out there, and I think it's of the purview of the trust to decide what they need to do to ensure that the things are being conducted and audited in the right way, and not the Monday morning quarterback sitting in his horseshoe do that. If that's the case, then we ought to be the trust, and we ought to get rid of the trust.
Okay. Pete and then David.
I want to emphasize that my opposition to this resolution as it's written has nothing to do with the way I feel about internal audit. I mean, internal audit is the absolute key to an effective management. In fact, I have been engaged for the last year with the Board of Education. Not that there's a problem other than that they don't have an internal auditor. That's the problem. Not that there's a big problem out there that needs to be looked at, but the value of an internal auditor is such that you can't afford not to do it, in my opinion. So but there's a difference between demonizing and then doing the audit and just doing a normal internal audit. And that's what I'm in favor of. I would think that an internal audit directed by the Board of Trustees is well in order, and I think the majority of the people around this horseshoe would agree with that. Whether or not we take the step of providing cover for someone who is a trustee who should not need cover. That's the role you assume when you accept the job as being a trustee. I think and to direct it at things that we hear, that we've seen in the newspaper. Some of the things are not audit questions, like whether or not it's proper for Paramedics Plus to donate $25,000 to pay Williamson's expenses as the president of the Ambulance Association is a policy matter. That's not an audit question. That's a policy question. You decide whether you want to do that, whether you think that's reasonable or not, and then you decide it's not an audit question. I mean, they know precisely the amount of money. They know precisely where it went. They know precisely what it was used for. If it's bad policy, it's bad policy. But it's not something you need an auditor to tell you. I mean, you could do that. If those are the facts, then you could make a decision whether it's against the policy of IMSA or whether it's not against it. And if it's not against the policy but should be, you can implement a policy that says it should be. I would not like to believe that all these years the trustees have done a poor job, because I felt like it's been run pretty well, really, over time. Now, that doesn't mean it has been, because I think it has been, but I think that we ought to give them the benefit of the doubt in that regard, and do an internal audit on matters that are important. But again, that's not for us to say. That's for them to say. I think they know what we think by what we've talked about around this horseshoe today. But to pass a resolution is, again, I can't vote for it.
David? Well, first of all, I think the discussion this morning has been excellent. There's not one thing that's been said that I could disagree with from everybody's comments, so I appreciate everybody voicing their opinions and ideas. I'm disappointed if the chairman has stated in a sense to Councilman Shadee that he won't take any action unless we force him to. I think that's inappropriate. If a member of the trustee feels like there are sufficient indications that something needs to be examined, that in and of itself should be sufficient cause for, if nothing else, a meeting with Councilman Shadee and any other members of the trustees that have a concern with their external auditor. In fact, auditors encourage that kind of communications from their clients whenever members of the board have a concern. That should be addressed with the audit partner of the firm. I don't know who it is, but I'm sure they would welcome that type of communication, and then you could explain your concerns in that meeting. And like it's been suggested, that external audit firm could do a special engagement. We kind of refer to it as a internal controls study, to where even though it's a part of the annual audit, it's a unique, separate focus strictly on the internal controls that are in place, and whether or not there should be any potential changes. But that would be my preference, is that the trustees of IMSA make the decision to call for this internal controls study, or, as Pat suggested, more of a management study. Some firms, especially those with a lot of experience in this industry, some CPA firms, have the experience and expertise, Pat, to provide those types of services that you mentioned, but there are other more management consulting firms that could also be helpful in this regard. But so I'm disappointed that Ed's been almost forced to have to ask us to do that. I think that's not good leadership on the trustee's standpoint, or the chairman's standpoint, I mean, to put it in that kind of a sense. And I hope, and I would agree with us, we shouldn't be the ones calling for it. So I would hope that at the next trustee meeting of IMSA, they would agree to look into this and use whatever terms they want to, whether it's an internal control study, a management review, or some type of audit. I think that sounds appropriate. And again, I would encourage Councilman Shadee to contact the audit partner of the external audit firm, because they need this kind of communications. And I think they're probably waiting for a call from their client to discuss these issues, and let that be the starting point. I would say this: I do think the state's auditor certainly can do an internal control study. Again, they may not have much experience in this particular type of business, but they could do some of the financial reviews that have been requested, and then going on like a billing type of review, you might need to look at an outside firm. But again, I think all of this discussion has just been right on point. Everybody's brought out good ideas and comments, and I couldn't disagree with any of them. But I do think it's kind of, it would be better if the trustees themselves requested it at the next meeting. Now, if they don't, then we might need to look into that, and then, but I think it'd be a great opportunity for them to take it upon themselves to choose to have this kind of study performed. I really do. I think that would be the best recommendation. But if they choose not to, then I think we need to revisit that. Okay. Thank you.
Ed, you want the final word here?
It sounds like we have consensus not to go forward. I'm not understanding the resistance. We have a request from the chairman. It is not, the idea that, how would we feel if the EMSA asked us to do an audit, it's apples and oranges. We are the beneficiary. These are our citizens, our taxpayer dollars. We are, as a city, the beneficiary. They are running this for us. So it's impossible for them to ask us for and so I don't think it's out of line. If you haven't seen enough already, this is not just people talking in the newspaper. There's already enough that's been admitted to, that is not conjecture, that is not, if that isn't enough to, for everyone, you just have to vote your conscience. Pete, it's not a matter of, that we don't need an auditor to tell us whether it's okay for $25,000. You have to know about the $25,000 first, right? If you don't know about it, how can you know? You need an auditor to say, hey, what's this $25,000 check for, right? Because I didn't know about it. Many other people on the trust didn't know about it. You have to know that $25,000 was donated to EMSA first, and then you can ask, is it appropriate?
I wasn't going to say anything else, but if they had an internal audit system, which they should have, if they had one, it would have been picked up that way. It wouldn't have looked like a witch hunt, and that's what this looks like to me. The rest of you may just be totally convinced that that's a den of vipers, but I'm not. It looks from now, I wasn't going to say that, but that's exactly how I feel about it. It looks like a witch hunt, and to keep adding things on top of it that makes it look more and more like a witch hunt, like the language that's used in this thing, adds to it. If there's a policy question, you need to address the policy question. You don't need to do a headline thing like investigative internal audit immediately demanded by the Oklahoma City Council. Just do what you're supposed to do. Run the business like it's supposed to be run.
Witch hunt is an inflammatory term. You make it sound like people are just...
It is, and that's because I think immediate investigative audit is inflammatory. And that's why I say...
There's a difference between inflammatory and witch hunt.
Well, we're going to do inflammatory by degree. It is or it isn't, But that's what I think. You think it is, I think it's not. But I get a seat just like everybody else does, and I think it is. And I think we're adding to that. If we did it in a business setting and said we have discovered certain things that we think there needs to be an internal audit, that's one method. That's the one I prefer. The idea that we make a big public falderall about an immediate, what's my favorite phrase there, an immediate investigative audit. Why would we do that? Why not just do it like a business does it? Why not have an an internal audit system set up? If a policy is violated, the trustees ought to address it. That's what I think. I don't know why we want to make a headline out of it. I think we ought to go take care of business, and taking care of business is getting to the root of this, but you get to it through a business way. You don't get through it through a headline way, and that's what I think this is.
Yeah, we can. The headline's already out there, Pete, from behavior of the. I really resent that. It could just be. Well, But to say that everybody who has a problem with $1,700 first-class tickets, $500 hotel rooms, using taxpayer dollars to send chocolate-covered strawberries to people that have nothing to do with EMSA, interdivisional transfers.
Your mic's not on there.
That's not a witch hunt. That's trying to protect the taxpayer. Well, I can't imagine after this discussion.
Hit the button.
I can't imagine. I think the real utility is probably the discussion. I can't imagine after this discussion that the trustees wouldn't at least put it on the agenda. So I'll withdraw my motion, and we'll see what happens on April 25th.
Ed made one comment I think is pretty on target. He made several comments on target. I didn't mean it.
Thanks.
And that is, we have an obligation to the taxpayer to make sure this money is spent wisely. And for whatever reason, at one point in time, we chose to have a board of trustees carry out that responsibility. And if we feel that the trustees aren't doing their job, then we need to look at replacing either the structure or the individual trustees. I'm not sure which is to be done. However, we have given that responsibility, delegated it to the trustees to administer that operation to the extent that it's administered fairly and efficiently. And I think if the trustees are falling down in that area, then we need to do something other than just suggest they audit. Because all this is a suggestion.
All right. Withdrawn the resolution. All right. And Gary, items from council from you?
Mayor, if I may
David.
say, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to prolong this, but Councilman Shadid's comment, if we can back up concerning the casinos, I think are well put. I've seen it probably more so than other types of addiction because it tends to impact a person's financial situations. We've seen individuals having to claim bankruptcy. We've seen marriages break up, businesses break up, because one of the partners or business owners may develop this type of addiction. So I agree. We need to do everything to stay away from any kind of promotional activities related to casinos because nothing good comes out of them, not a single thing. We can find other ways for entertainment, and if we look upon it as an economic development effort, we are looking in the wrong area because there's more bad things coming out of it. I really don't know of any good things, so I just wanted to second, I don't have the statistics that Councilman Shadid has related to addiction, but we have seen it firsthand. It's probably any more the most common reason why somebody has embezzled from a business is to cover their gambling addiction. And again, we've seen it break up families, businesses. It's just devastating. It really is. Thank you.
Okay.
And yet we had no problem accepting the naming of our new baseball park after the only owner of casinos in the state, Indian tribe. And I'm not sure that I fully appreciate Mr. Councilman Shadid's comments about this line of difference between Newcastle casinos and Chickasaws, because the only owner of casinos in the state are Indian tribes. And so I think we sort of jumped from the pan to the fire in this one, but that's just personal.
Okay. All right. Items from council concluded. On to the city manager reports.
I just do want to make one comment. There technically aren't taxpayer dollars involved in the ambulance system. They are ratepayer dollars that are paid through Total Care. That doesn't mean we should be less of a steward over those dollars, but there is a legal difference between taxpayer dollars and Total Care fees associated with it. And again, that doesn't mean we need to treat them very carefully and be good stewards over those, but they are technically not tax dollars. With that, Kathy O'Connor is here to give a update on the Alliance for Economic Development.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to hear from me this morning. I wanted to give you a brief overview of the activities of the Alliance for Economic Development of Oklahoma City. This is actually our second quarter report. I apologize for the delay in presenting it to you. Long council meetings and other events have delayed my presentation, but I appreciate being here this morning with you. Just as a reminder, the purpose of the Alliance, or the agreement between the Alliance and the city, states that we're to provide coordination, management, planning, and implementation services related to the city's incentive programs, redevelopment programs, job creation sites, and help with the planning and implementation of the MAPS 3 projects. I thought I'd just kind of go through each of those areas one by one and talk a little bit about what our activities have been over the first 6 months that the Alliance was in existence. I do have some updated information that I'll kind of fill in about things that have happened over the last quarter. The first kind of incentive program that we're involved in are the city's tax increment financing programs. Probably the most active of those over the past year has been Project 180, funded by TIF 8. We provide advice and consultation on budget and financial issues, I serve on the Devon Implementation Committee, and then we provide advice on topics such as the new parking meters downtown, procurement of those meters. We've also provided assistance with the Myriad Gardens Foundation issues, taking over the management and operations of the gardens. And then we provided assistance and advice on the additional capital purchases they needed to make at the gardens after it opened, change orders, and other management issues. One of the other significant tax increment financing programs that we are involved in relates to residential projects downtown. There are several residential developments that are underway right now that are funded partially by TIF dollars. Those include the Level in the Maywood Park area, the Edge, which is an urban renewal project, and a few others. Some of the other things that we've been involved in relate to the city's new downtown housing study, developing a new implementation strategy for downtown housing development, looking at the city's TIF policies and trying to restructure those more for the market as it is today and how to encourage behaviors that we'd like to see in the future. The second incentive program that we're involved in is the GOLT bond program. This is the general obligation limited tax bond authorization that provides the local economic development incentive program that we call the Strategic Investment Program. The Alliance provides staff services to the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust, and I serve as the surrogate general manager. We also assist the OCEDT in implementation of job creation incentives for, in that quarter, it was for projects like Boeing, Cameron International, and Continental Resources. We've also participated in the Employment Land Study, which is a study that's being conducted through the Planning Department that's related to looking for or identifying the need for job creation sites in Oklahoma City, both industrial sites and office locations, and it's related to the update of the city's comprehensive plan. Some of the redevelopment programs that we're involved in are centered mostly around the Urban Renewal Authority. I serve as the executive director of the Urban Renewal Authority, and we have several projects underway right now that include the Edge, which is the redevelopment of the old Mercy Hospital site at 13th and Walker, the development of the downtown elementary school, and Sheridan and Walker. We continue to work on the Hill development, and I'm glad to say that they are seeing an increase in sales of the units that are completed over there. The Aloft Hotel is one of our projects, and it's coming up out of the ground pretty quickly, and it's a pretty exciting project. And then we're involved in the John F. Kennedy project area, which is around the Health Sciences Center and to the east of the Health Sciences Center, trying to develop single-family housing and look at commercial uses in that area. Some of the other redevelopment programs that we've worked on include participating in the city's retail study. Again, this is a study that the city's undertaking as a part of the update of the comprehensive plan, but we're participating in that as technical advisors and to provide information and consultation services as the city needs it. One of the areas that we've been focused on over the past few months is the downtown parking issue. The city was undertaking a downtown parking study for several months. We participated in that study, and we're waiting for the results to help work on an ongoing planning process to locate future parking garages. There is a need for parking in the downtown area. I believe the draft study that was presented to you mentioned that there's probably a need in the next 5 years of about 2,000 parking spaces. So we're working through a process and working with COTPA in the city on identifying the need for parking, which is what the parking study did, identifying where the geographical location of that need is. Unfortunately, in Oklahoma City, a lot of people don't like to walk very far to their parking garage, so we have to work on changing some behaviors for that a little bit as we try to find sites that fit that need. It's getting harder and harder as our core becomes more and more built out. So we evaluate sites and look for constraints and opportunities associated with each site and try to look at ways that we can begin to build some parking garages pretty quickly. So that's one thing that we've been very involved in and are pretty excited about working on.
Kathy, are you looking at sites outside of the immediate core of downtown as well?
Yes, most of the sites are outside of the immediate core. I would define them as that. One of them is the site south of City Hall that's owned by the Urban Renewal Authority. The Oklahoma City Industrial and Cultural Facilities Trust, which is also one of the entities that the Alliance helps to manage, owns a site at 5th and Robinson that we're also looking at, and then COTPA has some other alternatives as well. So, Maps 3...
Kathy, excuse me, on your parking thing, have you found any interest in the private sector of building these parking garages?
I understand that there is some interest in the private sector developing or expanding some of their parking garages. So I think we'll see some of that in the future as well that'll help offset that need that we have for additional parking downtown.
Kathy?
Yes, sir.
Are there any studies or have there been any discussions with COPTA as it relates to this continuation growth of parking garages and the need of having to provide a garage for vehicles? And at the same time, you know, we're promoting this whole concept of energy saving, green, and if the transportation system was upgraded to a level that you could see a decrease in the need of vehicles having to be on the road downtown Oklahoma City, one would think that you could almost gauge a future number of parking spaces that you would need for garages.
Well, and
it just
I
seems
just saw
like
Rick walk
sometimes
in.
it's counterproductive in reference to, on the one hand, we're talking about decreasing the number of vehicles on the road back and forth downtown, and on the other hand, we're saying that we need to build, you know, more of these garages. It's like, well, we either need to throw one of those concepts out and just live with the fact that we're going to continue to build garages.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that we have to keep in mind. First of all, there's an immediate need for additional parking, and some of the transit solutions are more longer term in nature. You know, we need additional parking now for some of the existing office buildings that are downtown. If we add any more inventory of office space, then hopefully over the long term, those transit solutions that you're talking about, you know, a better mass transit system, the modern streetcar, rail, some of those other options will help, you know, decrease the demand for structured parking in the immediate downtown area. But in the short term, in the next year to 3 years, I would say we have an immediate need for additional parking. And it's not all of that 2,000 spaces, but it's probably 1,500. So I think we have to look at the short-term issues and then the longer-term issues, and again, hope that we develop some additional office inventory downtown and get more people working down here too. So that will flow into more of the long-term transit solutions.
Yeah, Pete? I've always been struck by what I consider kind of a schizophrenic idea that you parking and transit are hooked together. It seems to me, and I hear what you're saying about the difference between short-term and long-term, but if we put money into a short-term parking solution, we're delaying a long-term solution, both because we're taking resources that could be used to work on a long-term solution, and second, we're making a long-term solution less viable. I mean, a long-term solution, if that includes a transit idea, we're making it less viable.
Are you saying you want to encourage transit by having less places for people?
Well, I mean, I think if you think that higher gas prices encourage transit by raising gas prices, make people less likely to drive their car, then parking problems would work the same way, I would think. I think you have to keep a balance between that idea, the two ideas. The idea that on one hand, you're going to spend a lot of money making it easier for people to continue to drive their vehicles. And on the other hand, you're going to try to say that that's a bad choice of words, but you're going to focus on a long-term solution. It seems to me they're counterproductive. One the focus on the short-term solution delays and takes funds away from the long-term solution.
I don't think that the short-term solution takes funds away from the those public transportation solutions. The parking garages that we're looking at are supported by the rates paid by the people who park in the garages. They're not subsidized garages. We're not even thinking about that. It's been a long time since the cities had to subsidize the parking system, and you remember when that happened.
Right, but if that's the case, why wouldn't we just let the private sector build it? Why would we be involved in it?
Well, I think the private sector will build some of them. Part of it is the expense and the immediate nature of the need to build some parking right now. I do agree that it's a very delicate balancing act, but I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that the growth in downtown is going to be such that we're going to need this bump in parking to help us get to some of the longer-term solutions, the mass transit, the public transportation solutions, all of those kinds of things.
I hope you're right, but a 30, 40-year history of COPPA has not shown that to be the case at all. In fact, it's just the opposite. We don't have a good either one. Neither do we have a really good parking system, nor do we have a good transit system. And I think it's because of almost, again, the schizophrenic idea that they're both, I think they're contradictory. I just think they're totally different. And if the longer we continue to go down that path that we think they're the same, I think the less likely we are to have a solution in either area. No. I mean, if we're going to wrap our arms around the automobile, we're any more than we already have. We did all this 180 stuff. We're making the streets narrower so people can walk. I think all those things are positive, and they're steps in the right direction. But to focus very much on the public sector being too caught up in building parking garages or helping finance them or whatever we do, I think is a long-term mistake.
It seems to me that the downtown streetcar would benefit from more parking downtown because people would arrive downtown as a destination and then be seeking the public transit.
Maybe. I also think you have to have more bodies. I mean, it's just a fact that public transit doesn't work without additional people, so that the bodies are the third spoke, if you will, or the third leg on that bench. And so being able to attract more folks, and we can't attract those folks unless we have some additional parking for them, so it is kind of all tied together.
I would say that currently, given the current parking situations, because I've heard comments from people who need to park down here, that it would be less likely that new businesses move to downtown when they recognize that there is a parking problem, compared with if we did have a less of a parking problem. I think it'd be even more attractive. I think downtown Oklahoma City is an attractive place right now for businesses to consider relocating to if they're not currently down here. But I do think that the parking issues will limit that desire to relocate. And then once they have relocated, then that creates a much stronger demand for the mass transit, in my opinion. Just a way, depending on how you look at it.
My only thought is, I think that's a logical, I'm not sure I agree with it, but it's not illogical. But it hadn't worked in the past. It hasn't worked. We're just doing the same thing over and over again that hasn't worked in the past. And the loser has been the transit system.
Can I just say, Pete, I think one thing we haven't had in the past is an integrated multimodal transit hub. And if you had, to get to what the mayor is saying, if you had a parking garage that was right next to the transit hub, that's how you integrate parking, the automobile, and people go to the parking garage, which is right next to the transit hub, then they use the streetcar, or they use rapid transit busing. But you have to get them all in one place. You have to get the buses to the transit hub. You have to get the automobiles to the transit hub, everything in one spot.
Even cities that have the best subway systems, the best bus lines, still have parking issues they have to deal with in the downtown area. It's part of it. It's a double-edged sword as we go forward, and we've handled that double-edged sword maybe not as well as we could have in the past. But one thing I do want to point out is that if we don't address some of the parking issues downtown, the competition is the suburbs. And if they're not able to come downtown because there's a lack of parking, then they choose to go up at Memorial and Rockwell and in Ward 8, and then we're never going to get the density downtown. And without that density, then we're never going to get good public transit. And I don't have a solution. It's just a comment that's.
But the problem is that you already have that. I mean, Ward 8 is just, it's blooming every day.
Yes, it is.
With new growth and new development. And I don't think parking has anything to do with it. I think there's some other major factors that...
For office development.
For office development,
but
parking could.
But the other thing, and I'm going to get off of this because I started this interruption. But I don't think you're going to find too many people that's going to drive their car downtown, park their car, and then get on a mass transit to go away from downtown. And what we have as far as proposed transit, with the rail downtown, it's going to be basically a circular downtown. But, I apologize. I apologize.
I brought it up. I started it. You didn't.
All right. Kathy, you want to continue?
Yeah. The next area that we've been working on involves MAPS 3, and we provide planning and coordination services. We work with city staff on the implementation of the MAPS 3 projects. One of the things that we have undertaken and are in the process of completing is we issued an RFQ in December to look for consultants to help us with the questions related to private investment related to the MAPS 3 projects, and how do we better leverage private development that's appropriate and of the quality and density and design characteristics that we think the MAPS 3 projects deserve. So we've issued that RFP, we received responses, we've done the initial evaluation of those, and we'll be interviewing firms in the next couple of weeks. One of the other things that the Alliance has been involved in is the land acquisition related to some of the MAPS 3 projects. That land acquisition is being handled through the Urban Renewal Authority for the MAPS 3 Park and the Convention Center. So we have been involved in those activities as well. Obviously, initially, we've been involved in a lot of startup activities. I'm not really going to go through all of these step by step, but we have integrated the staff of the Urban Renewal Authority, the Oklahoma Industries Authority staff into one new office location, and that's in the Hightower building on the first floor, if any of you'd like to come by and see us. We've tried to streamline various administrative activities. We've launched a website, developed a logo. We've begun a development of a website for the Urban Renewal Authority, which is something that they have not had in the past, and is we think pretty important to improving communication about what Urban Renewal Authority does. I've actually hired both of the project managers that I've been looking for the past few months, and they're here today with me. They're Cassie Poore and Dustin Akers. They joined my staff in the last couple of weeks, so very glad to have them on board. They both have master's degrees in sustainability or urban and regional planning, and I hope they're excited to be working with me. One of the other things that the agreement with the city talks about is creating efficiencies and cost savings, and we do try to keep that in mind all the time and try to generate those efficiencies and cost savings. Some of those have been achieved by just improving communications and coordination of resources. We have a lot better communication with the OIA and the INC Trust and the Urban Renewal Authority. I meet with city staff very regularly on a wide variety of topics, and I think we're working through all of the issues related to the projects we're working on together very well. We've been able to reduce expenses for all of the entities involved for things like rent and overhead. The Urban Renewal Authority's experienced probably about an $11,000 annual savings in rent. We've reduced some personnel costs. The city's been able to reduce one person from the city manager's office in the past year, so that was a savings of about $60,000. And I hope we've been able to improve the accessibility and image of the public entities involved with the Alliance at a minimal cost. So With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. There's a more lengthy narrative report that I think was in your packets again, and financial statements. So.
Yeah, Ed? I've read your interview with Lackmeyer on historic tax credits, which I think you'd certainly have support. Maybe, and I know this is not way outside your control, but in that interview you argued for transferability. Can you explain why, because that's certainly the more controversial aspect of it, why a developer would need to be able to transfer tax credits to an insurance company, say, that had nothing to do with the development?
In a lot of cases, when a development that needs historic tax credits is undertaken, the developer will set up a single-purpose company that only owns that building, for example. And in their first year, they may not have any income tax liability. So it's important to get basically investors in that project, to get other people to participate in the success of that project, and the transferability of those tax credits is what helps make that happen.
But what if you just extended the number of years that they could apply it to, so their next 5 years of state income tax liability?
There are some restrictions that roll into the pro forma of the business that would probably make that not very attractive to developers. They can't, they have to fund those tax credits over a certain period of time, and then they can't sell the building or make other changes to it. It's very restrictive on how you have to deal with the building, and so if we're trying to make development easier and happen for these historic buildings more quickly, then I don't know that that would work, but it might be an option.
Councilman Shadid, there's also some other limitations from passive loss rules for the investors who may participate in this venture. Those credits are treated like passive losses and can only be used to the extent of passive income. So it does complicate things, the direct use of those credits under our current law. We'd have to go to Congress to make some of those changes.
Kathy, can I ask a question, Rich, see if I'm on the right track? If I happen to have a tax credit that it's talking about and I can't use it, if an insurance company over there can benefit from it, they're going to give me some money for that tax credit, which helps me pay for my project that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so transfer is really, it's really a sale in that
It's a sale of the credit, yes, it is.
And actually, without it, you could, I don't see how you'd get development without it. I mean, the developers need the cash in order to make it work, and without the cash, they can't make it work. And the transferability of the credit is what provides the cash. I mean, I can see, because I went out and talked to Representative Dank, who's very much opposed to the transferability part of it, and I listened to what he had to say, but the bottom line is, do you want historic preservation redevelopment, or do you not want it? Because you can't get it without some way of funding. The only other way to do it would be to direct subsidies of some kind, a direct subsidy, and I just don't think, it is a bit distasteful. I could agree with you. I mean, there is some distaste in, say, somebody taking the money and being able to sell the credit for 80% of its face value to a very wealthy insurance company and use that. That's distasteful. On the other side of it, you wouldn't have the projects that we have without it. I mean, there's no other system in place that I can see or that I've ever seen proposed other than direct subsidy, which I don't think anybody would want to do that. That would keep it going. And when you look around at some of the projects that have been done and that could not have been done without the transferability, I think you have to decide whether you want to continue to subsidize that in that manner or you don't want to.
Pete, it may be too simplistic of an argument, but in one sense, you know, whether you allow the transferability and you allow an insurance company to take the credit, or whether you extend the time frame and you allow the developer to take the credit, it has zero impact at the end of the day on additional revenues in.
Right.
You know, if somebody's using the credit, somebody's not, paying the tax. So that argument to me doesn't really hold water.
Well, and the developer needs the money at the front, very early in the project in order to make the project work. I mean, I could go on a
And you
whole
can't
litany.
get a loan with that as collateral? I mean, that wouldn't help you get the funds?
Well, but it would, I don't know about how many lenders would lend against that with that. It could be, there's no question, but you've got to be able to show you're going to make a profit in order to be able to use the tax credit in order to do it. And some of these deals don't make money for a long time, and they're still valuable to the community. The one in Shawnee comes to mind, a big hotel there in downtown Shawnee, which was just going to rack and ruin. It was rehabbed with investment with these historic tax credits transferred, and it is now, not only has it revitalized that building, but it's revitalized a little community in downtown Shawnee that was not there before that. A little grocery store, a couple of little restaurants. It's cleaned the downtown area up. You go to Shawnee now, you drive downtown, you feel like you're in a vibrant community again. I mean, I'm not, there are other things. The Coleman Theater in Miami, if you haven't seen that, it's almost worth whatever they did in order to just go look at it. I mean, it's just an amazing restoration of a really outstanding building. They're not just the Skirvin, they're not just the Sieber. They go all over the state and
Lots of different kinds.
what?
It's not just historical tax credit, there's a whole tax credit program beyond historical tax credit that encourages new businesses to develop.
Right. Well, I'm not as passionate about most of them as I am the historic tax. I understand. Well, everybody's is. I mean, if you're passionate about everything, you'd be out of breath. I mean, everybody's passion is flexible. But to me, it's valuable to try to preserve it's a way we preserve our history to a certain extent. And to me, it's valuable.
All right. Anything else?
I do, just a big picture. First, let me say, I don't know this gentleman, but Cassie, I don't think you could do better. We work with her on the Oklahoma plan, and so that's a great height. But just, if I could just talk to the big picture, and I think we're just going to disagree, but I just want to know that you understand, when the Alliance first came up, there was fear among myself. And I just want to know that you understand why people like myself and others would fear kind of what the Alliance is and what it's doing. Basically that policy is being segregated out and that we're losing control. I still can't understand, like on the MAPS 3 RFPs that you talked about, why we would have a nonprofit be doing that. Why, when ADG is issuing RFP after RFP on private investments with wellness centers and all this, I just want to know that you understand, even if we agree to disagree, that you understand the fear that either by omission, that we don't hear everything, you might try something and it doesn't, and then we never hear about it, or that you offer an incentive to someone, and then we're kind of presented with, okay, if you want Continental Resources, for example, to relocate here, you have to do this. But maybe, if it had been presented to them originally different, we would have two options instead of one. Do you understand the reason behind the fear?
I understand what you're saying, and I can assure you that no policy decisions are made by the Board of the Alliance. The policy decisions related to incentive programs, to the other operations like urban renewal and the OIA are all made by the boards, the trustees of those trusts or the Board of Commissioners of the Urban Renewal Authority. We do not make policy decisions. The MAPS 3 RFQ was something that was included in the contract that we have with the city. So we're trying to carry out the provisions of our contract with the city and the Economic Development Trust. I would anticipate that the final report that's produced by that consulting team would be presented to the Economic Development Trust and the City Council and maybe even the MAPS 3 Advisory Board at some point. I mean, that's really up to you all to decide, but I I see this as a collaborative project that's very public, and the product will be public. So,
Do you see is it theoretically possible, I'm not saying that you're doing it at all, I'm just saying, is it theoretically possible to affect policy by omission? Not your entity, let's just say some theoretical entity, that by omitting a study or negative data, or could you affect policy by omission?
I think that's true of any staff person working for the city or any of the other trusts that you all serve for. I think that's a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
As we've gone forward through this first year, as we started out, we're plowing new ground, and I believe, from my standpoint, a year into this, that it's working out very well. We have achieved some financial efficiencies. She's brought some new resources to the area. We have a new coordination between some entities that were not necessarily coordinated in the past. I mean specifically on that with the OIA and the INC Trust and Urban Renewal and such. The administration of how the Economic Development Trust, I think, has been pretty much transparent to the Economic Development Trustees. Kathy was the Surrogate General Manager before. She is today. She meets with me on a regular basis every Monday morning, so I feel that from the administration we know what's going on. She does meet with the MAPS 3 meeting on a weekly basis, so with the planners and the planner, Russell, and the other folks as we go forward. She brings, I think, a helpful perspective to that process as we go forward. She's continued involvement in helping the coordination of Project 180, and her office is named further away where it is now than it was before. And I do see that there's an opportunity for future opportunities as we go forward. But from my standpoint, it has worked well going through the first year. Okay. The next report we have has to do with arbitrage, and we don't have a presentation on that today, but Craig and Kenny Sudol here are here to answer any questions regarding the arbitrage report. And I know David's got one. Oh, no. Okay.
All right. All right. With city citizens to be heard, Joe Sarge Nelson. Joe, we'll need your name and address for the record, and you know the rules. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Joe Sarge Nelson. Excuse my teeth. I've got oral surgery in about 2 hours. I came here today to pay an apology to all of you. And do not take the apology as a weakness, because I am not a weak person, but I do know where I stand. To Mr. Mars, I apologize to your face. Mr. Shadid, I also apologize to you. Mr. McAtee, again, my teeth. Mr. White, the City Council, which was kind enough to tell me the other day, tapped me on the shoulder and said I could speak now. The City Manager, and of course you, Mr. Cornett, the Mayor. Mrs. Kersey, I overstepped my bounds in the way I handled matters, which I think I addressed the issue a little abruptly, and I apologize for that. Mr. Greenwell, I know you and Mr. Shaddard are both new on the council, and I apologize for my actions. Ms. Sawyer, Pete, I owe you a special apology. Pete, you'll have to forgive me, Mr. Kelly. My attack and the way I went about it was kind of funneled, narrow-minded. I had a lot on my mind. I had a lot of things going on. I had a lot of people putting some pressure on me, and I addressed the issues wrongly for the most part. And Mr. Ryan, I hadn't forgot you. Okay. Mr. Cornett, the idea of running for mayor that I put in both of my documents have been withdrawn. I have no desire to run for mayor of Oklahoma City. It's a glorious position to represent the people and do the job that you do. But I did retract it. It was a bad tactic on my part, and I do apologize for that tactic. And I know the city councilor saw my website. It was cute. All it said was I was running for mayor, and I had no platform, no nothing, but it served my purpose at the time. Today, the reason I'm coming is, well, I still got my sanity and my marbles. is I'm going to make a request of one. It's going to be one of many, but I'm going to do it very carefully and quietly. You have to excuse me, I broke my glasses and everything else. But without them, I can't see right now. I apologize. I guess that's not only me falling apart, the rest of my anatomy is too. Anyway, I'm going to make an official request so all of you people know, since apparently this one issue did come up. I'm requesting, and this document will be given to Mrs. Kersey, because since she's the city clerk, it will go to you. I need the naming rights of the lease for the ballpark. I need a copy of the current lease, any and all payments made pursuant to that lease. Item number 2, in reference to the Civic Center property between here and the Civic Center and the City Hall, the property plans, plat, ownership papers, and any document relating to the transfer or property lease or sale. And item number 3, which is going to be a touchy item, it refers to the Bass Pro Shop. I need payments or statements of the lease, income it's brought in to this city for the last 7 years. And that's what I need to start with. And I'll give this to Mrs. Kersey. And then that is, as a taxpayer, I'm just making that formal request. So that's all I've really got to say. And again, I do apologize for my prior actions. And I wish you all well. Ms.
We have
Kersey,
executive session. We'll
do
be
I
back.
bring this to you or let this lady do it? Okay.
Need a motion on item 8N. Okay, we have a motion to reject the item brought before us under item 8N. That motion has been seconded. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We're adjourned.